To exercise your will, you have to do two things. First, you have to make a decision. For example, quit drinking or quit gambling. Then, you have to adhere to that decision, regardless of the stressors and temptations you encounter. The decision matrix is a great tool, and it will help you perform both of these critical tasks. So here is the decision matrix I give to my clients. The neat thing about it is that it's the size of a dollar bill, so you can carry it wherever you carry your dollar bills. Pulling it out and reading it in the midst of a crisis can remind you of why you made the decision and thereby help you adhere to it. But that's for later. Right now, I want you to use this tool to make a decision that you won't later violate. We know that you will experience conflict about using the incentive in the future. Your subjective experience during these critical moments will determine the outcome. The purpose of the decision matrix is to put you in touch with these future experiences so that you make your decision at both an intellectual and an experiential level. So work with me and you'll see what I mean. First, pause the video and get a piece of paper. Now draw a big plus in the center, so you have 2 columns and 2 rows. Label the left column positive and the right column negative. Label the top row short-term and the bottom row long-term. In the top left quadrant, write the immediate positives of using the incentive. For example, pleasure, taste, relief, whatever is true for you. If you've tried to quit in the past and lapsed, what were you hoping to get that caused you to lapse? Take your time to include all of the payoffs that pull you to using the incentive. Imagine you are craving the incentive. What are you craving? When I say imagine, I mean put yourself in the experience in your imagination and see if you can experience what you really would during a crisis that would motivate you to lapse. Some people do not experience strong cravings preceding a lapse. Whatever is true for you, see if you can capture the experience and give words to it. Now for the top right quadrant. Imagine that you were trying to quit or cut down, and you lapsed. You failed. How would you feel about it the next day? For example, some people would feel guilt, disappointed in themselves. Write that down in the top right box. You're facing a formidable challenge. Our enemy offers the visceral experience of immediate pleasure or relief. And we are attempting to battle that with words, abstractions. You know from your own personal history that this is not a fair fight. To even things up, you have to go beyond abstraction and fight visceral experience with visceral experience. Words such as guilty, disappointed in the self have meanings. And these meanings are subjective experiences. It is the subjective experiences, not the words, that determines the outcome of conflicts. The decisions of your rational mind don't mean anything unless they are supported at an experiential level. So when you use words such as disappointed in yourself, I want you to experience what that's really like. Fortunately, you know what that's like. You've earned the experience. So take your time to teach your experiential self what your rational mind has learned by communicating with it in a language that it understands. Here is what I want you to learn from this thought experiment. The outcome of any motivational conflict depends upon the contents of your consciousness at that moment. As you've just seen, you can increase the motivation to prevent relapse by aiming your attention to the recollection of the self-loathing that resulted from a previous relapse. On the other hand, if you imagined how good it would feel to use the incentive, your motivation to relapse would increase. Now here is another thought experiment for you. Instead of remembering how you felt after the lapse, see if you can remember what you were experiencing just before the lapse, during the motivational conflict. My guess is that at that moment, you were imagining the pleasure or relief of using the incentive, which pulled you toward lapsing. If there was any conflict, it was the white-knuckled resistance to this pull. But now that you appreciate how this creature you inhabit works, you can cease being the plaything of whatever temptations happen to come along by intentionally evoking the motivation that is consistent with your interests and principles. To practice this, let's move on to the more important role, the long-term consequences of maintaining your relationship with the incentive. The bottom left quadrant is for you to write the long-term positives of using the incentive. If you can think of any long-term benefits, they go here. For example, some people smoke cigarettes to help manage their weight. Some salesmen believe that drinking helps them access or bond with their customers. But in most cases, this quadrant will be empty. As you may have guessed, the next quadrant is the important one. But don't write yet, because the natural tendency is to glibly list the obvious downsides. For example, death, loss of relationships or job, etc. But these are just words. And the point of this exercise is to go beyond words, to direct experience. The objective is to work with your direct experience so that you can intentionally influence your motivation in the here and now. So instead of using your rational mind to fill this box with words, I want you to use your imagination to experience what these words mean. For example, if health concerns are an important motive for you, instead of writing words such as health concerns or death, I'd like you to imagine that you're the director of a movie about your future. And your assignment is to show what will happen to you if you don't take the warning seriously. For example, imagine your physician giving you the dread diagnosis, whether the doc had a poker face or was distraught. What was your reaction on hearing the diagnosis? Who would you have to tell? For example, a parent, a lover, or a child. And the details of how that conversation would go. You get the idea. Considering what you know about yourself, what imagery can you construct that would bring the message home to you that your relationship with the incentive is a bad deal, that the costs are greater than the benefits? Now, whatever imagery produced the greatest emotional reaction within you, write a few words in the lower right-hand box to evoke that imagery. W.C. Fields and Mark Twain both came to the same conclusion about incentive use disorders. Quitting is easy. The hard part is adhering to the decision. Remember, there are two parts to exercising your will. The first part is to make the decision, and the second part is to adhere to it. You're likely to make the decision to quit when you're thinking of the costs of using the incentive. But any time after that, you'll be in conflict whenever you think of the benefits of incentive use. The outcome of this conflict typically depends upon which side is stronger at that moment, not which side was stronger when you made the commitment. Those portrayals of conflict with an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other don't do justice to the heroic nature of your challenge. This is not a fair fight. Pulling you in one direction is the experience of desire for immediate pleasure or relief. Trying to battle that with words or abstractions is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. During a motivational conflict, words and abstractions don't have a chance against raw experience. To influence the outcome of this conflict, you have to fight direct experience with direct experience. Now, you've just had the opportunity to see how the decision matrix works, and more importantly, how a creature such as yourself works. Specifically, this first use of the decision matrix gave you the opportunity to evoke the direct experience of disappointment and fear, to mindfully influence your motivation to use the incentive. This is an example of exercising your will, so that you follow your most advantageous path rather than the path of least resistance. The next video will focus on the second stage of exercising your will, namely, adhering to your decision, even in the face of great stress and temptation.